Welcome y bienvenidos to this episode of the Cultural Capacity Podcast. I am Justine Gonzalez, one of your teachers here on the podcast. I am so thrilled to be here for this episode. Our first featured voices interview was live all of this February, and I am going to give you another sneak peek in this podcast episode of next week's episode that will release, featuring the incredible, the dynamic, the hostess with the mostest, Miss Shawnta Barnes. Very soon, she will be Dr. Shawnta Barnes. And I am so excited to give you a sneak peek, a preview into our next featured voices interview with Shawnta. It's going to be running live all of March on our YouTube channel. You can also go back and watch Martine Calau's interview, best-selling author, and I learned so much from her when I got the chance to sit and interview her and learn more about her story and have a conversation with her at the Cultural Capacity table, so to speak, our virtual table. So as soon as we get through the intro song, you are going to hear an ad, and then you're going to hear this episode, which is all about how can I manage conflict more effectively. Very important topic right now and always, not only in the workplace professionally, but also in our personal lives. I felt very challenged reflecting on this episode myself. And what you're actually hearing is the audio from one of our workshops that's going to be released on YouTube. So you are getting two sneak previews today. And if you're interested in that introspective practices guide that I'm speaking about, you can see the full video on our YouTube channel. And we have a little sign up in the process that we will be adding. So you can download that tool. But in the meantime, you can go watch the workshop and see the visual that I'm talking about on our YouTube channel that is linked in the show notes, along with other aligned resources from every episode that we air. We make sure that we try to align the resources that align with the topic of the episode. So, in today's episode, how can I manage conflict more effectively? You will see in the show notes, we have an article as well as a protocol of 7 steps that you can directly go to for free, and you can see how can I better set myself up for success when it comes to courageous conversations. So you will see that in the show notes. You can immediately go utilize for yourself with your teams. That is also how we hope that you use this podcast. Share certain episodes with your team, bring it up, talk about it. You don't have to agree, but it's just a way to have a food for thought, not only with yourself, but with your team members too, your colleagues that you work with. So, again, I'm so thrilled you're here right after this episode, which is only about 6 or 7 minutes long, the meat of the episode on managing conflict. Then you're going to get about a 2-minute preview of Miss Shawnta Barnes' interview, which again will be going live for our next featured voices during none other than March Women's Month. I think it's very fitting for her. You'll see why even when you hear some of her snippets of her interview. Just a phenomenal woman that I am lucky and grateful to know. So let's dive into this episode. Let's continue to get compassionately curious together, not just in our personal lives, also in our professional lives. Take care and let's hop in. Welcome y bienvenidos to the Cultural Capacity Podcast, an Educator Aid Incorporated sponsored learning tool. I'm your host and guide, Justine Gonzalez, and here on the Cultural Capacity Podcast, we are committed to exploring and supporting individuals and organizations on their journey of self-aware leadership, emotional wellness, and development of effective cross-cultural communications. Be sure that you check out each of the show's episode notes, where every time we're sharing free learning resources and tools, as well as text recommendations, workshops, trainings, and also featured guests in our monthly extended episodes, where we feature thought leaders, both existing and emerging, across these realms of topics that we explore together. The design of our episodes, like this one you're about to hear, is where we typically spend around 15 minutes diving deep with one specific question. This is intentional by design, so be sure that you tune in throughout the whole episode. Tap into the show notes to explore and examine both the free and paid resources for you and your teams, the organizations you serve in. And be sure to hit follow, subscribe, or share when you find value and feel led to share with others. I'm so glad that I'm here with you. I'm so glad, most of all, that you showed up for yourself today. Let's dive in together and let's continue to live out our lives in a compassionately curious way that brings out the best in not only ourselves, but in those we interact with every day. Hey, you all, Justine Gonzalez here, one of your teachers on the Educator Aid Incorporated YouTube channel. Let's hop into it. If you haven't, go back and watch the initial video. It is what my little face screen is covering right now. We actually dive into number 1 on our introspective practices guide. And so this is not only for your personal world, but also your professional world. And it's this idea of introspection. One of the things you're hearing a lot about these days is wellness in the workplace, as well as mental health awareness, and just making sure that we have workplaces where there is a sense of belonging. And we are also aware and take ownership for how we're showing up as professionals in the workplace. So you can see here, and we like to display this fully, any tools that we're sharing here, or just these little teaching videos, we hope that it's a dose of really diving deep with something that you can apply to yourself. Maybe you spend time drawing, maybe you spend time journaling as a result of this, etc. Please go back and watch the first one if you want a more in-depth look at this tool, where we did dive into number 1, identifying the stressors in your life. So the next one I want to talk about is number 2. We're just going in order here, and I will move my little face here, but right below me, you can see the managing conflict. And one of the biggest questions that I like to encourage people to do, part of my story, and my sister's as well, she's on this channel, she's a part of our team. Educator Aid is our family company together. But one of the things that her and I realized growing up is that we had a unique opportunity to learn about communication skills. And being third culture kids, meaning our mother's background was Amish and Mennonite and our father Puerto Rican, we grew up in a very much a bicultural home. And one of the things that we saw on display was the differences of how our parents and their families managed conflict. And it's still noticeable to this day, obviously. And of course, that has informed me and my sister and how we show up when it comes to conflict. So for this question, we've posed for you to introspect and really go within yourself, whether that's meditating or praying or journaling. Maybe you write, maybe you paint, maybe you go on nature walks, whatever that space is that you actually get time to go inward. That's what introspection is. I'm reflecting on myself and inward, becoming almost that little observer on the shoulder. And you put a little version of yourself and think through, what is happening right now? What's happening in my body? What's happening in my spirit? What's happening in my mind? What's happening with my heart and my emotions? But when you encounter conflict of some sort, maybe you feel tension from others. Maybe you are in an actual argument with somebody that friend, family member, etc. This happens to all of us. Maybe it's because you read a Facebook post or a Twitter post and a tweet, and you have some type of reaction. Either way, how we manage conflict directly relates, and many of these concepts on this guide that we have, our introspective practices guide, a lot of these are interrelated, right? How I manage interpersonal communications often influences how I manage conflict. How I manage conflict often influences my stress levels, right? So you kind of see the circle of how these things interact. They're very interdependent. in more academic terms, that's called an isomorphism, where there's kind of this symbiotic play off of one another. One isn't necessarily more important or vital. However, we have to create that space to actually examine that inner working relationship within ourselves. And so managing conflict is really just the note that I wanted to put in this quick video today of reflecting on, and I've been reflecting on this myself in this year in particular. How was managing conflict modeled for you when you were growing up? And then also to go deeper, this isn't on here, but me personally, this is a thought process that I have. And in order to go deeper, I then ask myself, what did I experience as little Justine, little me? So ask yourself, as little me, what did I experience when I was around arguing? Even if you were raised in a single parent home or you were raised by grandparents, whoever your family structure, when there was fighting happening, be it physical, verbal, emotional, etc., what was happening to little you and how were you responding to that? The deeper I go, I also ask myself, are you still replicating any of those learned patterns that you picked up on as a child, Justine? And one of the things for me, if I'm being very transparent, is I become a little bit pouty, and I go within myself often when I'm not really sure how to process a current conflict. So I know for myself as an adult, there are situations and matters when it comes to conflict that I do best if I can advocate for myself and say, I'm going to need a moment to process this. And then I get time to step away and process it instead of just being reactive in the moment. So just wanted to drop that note, thinking out loud here, getting ready to get onto a coaching call with a great leadership team. And just wanted to drop this note. Thank you all, and make sure you hit subscribe. We're so glad that you're here. And most of all, let's continue to get compassionately curious together. All right, as promised, first of all, thank you so much for your commitment to yourself, for showing up for this episode, and reflecting on how you can manage conflict more effectively in your own life. So, as promised, with no further ado, let's hop into some snippets with Miss Shawnta Barnes, as her featured voices interview will be going live next week on our YouTube channel, where you can catch it initially. Let's hop in. Persistence to keep going with a goal, and to also just live your life unapologetically. So those are two things specifically that I admire about you. So I'm going to hand it over to you right now. Just anything that you want to introduce about yourselves, or that you want the listeners to know about you before we dive into our conversation.
Well, thanks for that wonderful introduction. And I really like that you said I'm very persistent, because most of the time when I introduce myself, I either pick and choose the parts of me that's relevant to the situation I'm in, because my introductions tend to be long. And people ask, like, how are you doing all these things? And first of all, you have to be persistent to do anything well. And then my persistence is easy because I do things I'm passionate about. So I think what's important to know, or what people find is a very interesting fact about me, is that I have 5 education licenses. So I went to Purdue University, left there with a 5 through 12 English license and a 5 through 12 reading license. And then I picked up an English as a new language license, P through 12 library media, P through 12. I ended up picking up a P through 12 reading license at one point in time. So essentially I have like 2 reading licenses, which is nuts. And then I picked up a building administration license. And
she just picked it up. Listener, she just picked it up casually. I'm kidding.
And I've had to
something.
I would say 2 things. I feel like I have a conservative lifestyle, and that's from a kid, and then growing your own food. As I said, I was raised missionary Baptist. My great uncle was a pastor of a church. My grandmother was the organist from our church. She was like over vacation Bible school. So you name it, praise team, drill team, kids choir, all the things. I was there at church multiple times a week. And so recently I went a few months ago, I went to a trip in Vegas with two of my friends, and I realized I was getting like low key anxiety, and it was conflicting with like my conservative values, and so sometimes that shows up, even though I try to honestly push against those. I think they show up sometimes in like things have to be a certain way, and then to growing your own food. My great grandparents, my great uncles, they grew food. My dad grew food, and the thing I took away from that, you need to know where your food comes from, and food is just so weighted down, and like it's really cheap to grow things. I mean, literally, how I grow kale, I have a bed, I throw kale seeds out. I don't do all the little stuff. You can, so I have videos. So
All right, so you all can see, rather you can hear, why I absolutely loved this conversation with Shawnta, who, in my opinion, is very much a Renaissance woman. You get an idea of not only the vastness of her professional credentials, but also some of the topics we dive into, from sustainable food to values we were brought up with. So many different avenues that we go down during this powerful conversation. I hope that you get compassionately curious with us and you tune into the full episode, which we'll be releasing in the next week or so on our YouTube channel. Be sure to hit subscribe in the show notes. Go hit subscribe so you get the notifications. And I can't wait for you to hear the whole conversation. And I appreciate you tuning in. And most of all, for showing up for yourself. Take care, and let's continue to get compassionately curious together. Thank you so much for showing up for yourself today and also tuning in to this episode of the Cultural Capacity Podcast. We couldn't do this show without the help and support of listeners and viewers in 2023, when we will add our extended episodes to our YouTube channel. So please search Educator Aid on YouTube and subscribe now. We are in the process of officially launching that channel. Haven't been utilizing it for a number of years, and we're excited. We're excited to have you join in on these powerful conversations where we are going to be having some extended episodes, and you get to sit down and tune in and learn from some incredible thought leaders. So again, thank you for your commitment to yourself and your own personal learning as well as professional development journey. I thank you for being here, and let's continue to get compassionately curious together. Take care.